Let's implement some aggregate functions in C#. This is Daniel, and you are going to get coded. As always, we are going to create a simple console application in Visual Studio. So I'll go to File, New Project. Under Visual C#, Windows Desktop, I'm going to choose Console App, and then I'm going to name this Aggregate Functions. And then I'm going to hit OK. While this is loading, again, I have a link, and you can find the link in the description down below. So, as I said, we are going to implement some aggregate functions in C#. So, a warning before we continue. We are going to implement sum, average, minimum, and maximum. So, in total of 4 different methods. These are already built in C#, so you don't have to implement them. You don't have to write them. But again, it's a good exercise. It's a good thing to actually know how they work under the hook, in the background, and what should you expect from the implementation of such a method, such a function, okay? So I'm going to, as you see here, to implement each one of them in 2 ways. So the procedural or the old way, and then the aggregate function the new way. Okay, so one by one I'll start with sum, and you can see like the old way and the new way. And I have a tip over here as well. I provided the procedural examples for you to understand what kind of things happen under the hook. These are good for exercises. So we do some exercises today. In general, in real-world projects, you write procedural code only in edge cases when it's necessary. So you don't actually jump into and start to write procedural code. So you take a step back and you try to think, do I remember, is there any built-in method or function in my programming language that can help me do this? So you don't want to waste your time. You want to use your time in the most effective, productive way. So first of all, you try to think, then you try to search. So do a search on Google, try to find a built-in function for what you want to do, like a filter or a sum or an average, just something. Maybe it's there already. If it's not, then you have to implement it. And again, if you have specific requirements or your company has specific requirements that you need to implement, then it makes sense to write procedural code. So when you write procedural code, you just write everything. So you don't use libraries, and you don't use kind of all the built-in functions in the framework. So you try to do your thing. So you try to implement those things. So in real-world projects, you don't do this. But again, if they have specific use cases, you need to do or to implement procedural code. Okay, so I hope you understand these 2 things, so procedural code and built-in functions, and when to use them. So don't jump straight into your IDE and try to reinvent the wheel and do all those crazy things. This is an exercise. Again, this can be very, very helpful for you if you need to actually build those strange or edge cases in a project, okay? So it's not at all time wasted. If you watch this video, I encourage you to watch this video, and you are going to actually see how to implement these things. So you are going to get better at programming, hopefully. So I got that out of the way. Again, this is not mandatory, this is not required. So I'm going to create an array of prices for our example. The type of the array is inferred as double because we have numbers with decimal points. So you can see here I have a prices array, and then inside this one I try to assign some values. Okay, so it's just one value with some items. You have 12, and you can see the second and the 5th one, so the last one, have decimal points. This array is going to be inferred as a double. So let's try to see that. I'm going to actually say var prices, and again, I'll try to keep the numbers, so I'll try to keep the example as it is. So I'll say 12, 43.5, 32, 9, and 3.0. And if I hover over var, you can see that the type is double. So we have here a variable of type array, which contains double elements. Okay, so even though these are ints, double contains ints as well. So you have kind of ints here, and then the double type is above the int type, so it includes the int type. Okay, so it's one step higher, one step. You understand what I mean. So this is like inclusion. So inclusion of types in C#. There are types that include other types, and this is one of them. So this is like how you can think about what happens here. So how the compiler actually infers that this is a double. Okay, so the first one, the sum. So let's see how to calculate the sum procedurally. So first, procedurally. You can see that I have a sum and I use a d here. So let's try to see if I put a sum here equals 0 without the d. So by default, this is int 32. So this is an integer. But I want a double. I want to actually calculate the sum here, so to increment the sum with all these prices. By having the d after the number, this becomes a double. So this is how you can convert or parse or cast to a double. You can use the d after the number. Okay, so we have the sum over here, and then we just use a for loop. So for tab, we are going to leave I as it is, and then prices dot length. So we are going till the end, and then enter. Inside the for, we are going to say sum plus equal prices index I. Okay, this is going to increment to the sum that specific price. So let's explain. The first thing, we are going to iterate over the prices array. So one by one, we get each price. And then this represents that specific price. The I is only the index. Computers count from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This represents the item. So at index or at position I want to get this one. And then increment the sum with that one. I could have coded or implemented like this. So sum prices index I. These two lines of code do the same thing. They increment the sum. So you can see here is the actual code, the actual idea that happens here. So we get the sum and we try to add the prices index I, so the item. But this is a shorter, more convenient, more readable, easier to understand way of doing the same thing. So try to avoid fluff in your code, like extra things that should not be there. This is why you can use the increment. This is the reason why this exists. This works with other operators as well. So you can use minus or the slash for division, or the asterisk for multiplication, or the modulus operator for the remainder. Okay, so all of these operators work the same. So we get the sum and we try to operate on that sum with another element, with another value. So this tries to increment the sum with this price, so adds that one. So I hope this is clear. And then console.writeLine, I'm going to write line the sum, which is cool. Again, I need to keep the console opened, so I can say console.readKey, and this is going to wait until I press any key. So F5, and I hope this will work. And this works indeed. So 99.5. And I hope this math is good. So it's going to be like 75 and then 87 and these things. Okay, so it's kind of good. So C# knows how to count. But again, this is the procedural way of doing this. But the array provides us with the sum method, which we can call directly. So instead of doing this very thing, and I'm going to actually comment this out. So Control K C to comment lines. I'm going to do what you see here. So I'm going to use the same variable name, and then I will say prices.sum. So you can see the array provides us with a sum method. And if we press F5, you can see that we get the same result. So this sum method over here can be used. So again, you don't have to implement, you can use the sum method. But again, in some interviews, whenever you get a job, people might ask you to implement something like this, and if you just say that sum, well, it's not enough, you need to implement the whole thing. So I am against that mindset. I am truly against that mindset, because if a person who tries to hire me asks me to do something like this, I'm actually questioning what they are doing in their company. Because if they want me to do something like this, and if this is that important to implement in an interview, which takes like half an hour, 1 hour, I don't know, it sends me a signal that they are not actually implementing the right things in their own code. Like right now, and don't get me wrong, right now in 2018, you need to know so many things. So you need to be aware of frameworks and libraries and packages and tools. So all these things, and it's not easy to accumulate. It's not easy to get all this knowledge. So a person who hires you should be more concerned about projects that you have used, frameworks that you have used. These things and these implementations should be secondary because of that reason. And the second reason, because you can just use Google. So you can just search for this and you can find it. So you can find maybe my implementation, which I think is elegant, which is clean. So you can have like a very easy resource to use whenever you want to implement this. So again, be aware of this and try to have the right mindset, okay? So let's continue with the average. And I'm going to actually comment this code out. So Control KC. And I'm going to implement the average. So let's write the procedural code to find out the average. To do this, we need to calculate the sum and then divide it by the total number of items in the array. So we are trying to do something like very similar, like actually the same. We have a var sum, we have a for loop, but then we have an extra variable called average, which calculates the average. So average in math is calculated by calculating first the sum and then trying to divide the sum based on the number of elements in that specific array or how many items you have. So in our case, we have 5 numbers, so this sum is going to be divided by 5. So let's try to implement this again. So hopefully you are going to remember it. So var sum is going to be 0d because it's going to be decimal, and then 4. I is going to remain the same. I'm not going to rename the I, and then I'm going to say prices.length. And then enter. Inside I'm going to increment the sum, so prices index I. And then I'm going to say var average. So this is the new code. Average is going to be sum divided by prices.length. Okay, so how many items you have. And I'm going to console.writeLine that specific average variable, and let's try to press F5 and see what we get. So we get 19.9 because we divide the sum by 5. But again, the array exposes the average method, which comes in handy. So you don't have to do the whole thing. So again, I'm going to actually comment this out, and I'm going to say var average, so the same variable name to be consistent. and then average. The array provides us with this very method. So let's try to say F5, and we are going to get the same result, 19.9. And also this is a good way of actually seeing if you implemented these functions well. So it's a good sign. The two results are the same. Okay, the minimum. Let's see what is the minimum value in the array. So you can see I have a minimal variable first, so I declare it, and then I assign a value. So this is like, what value should we assign? Should we assign 0? Should we assign something else? Well, we need to get the minimum value, and if there is no 0 in an array and you say 0, then well, it's not going to work. Some people try to get like the minimal actual value for an int, so you can do that. You can say, oh, and before that I want to comment the average, so we want to move on. So the minimum is going to be like this. So int dot minimum, so minimum value, and this is going to actually get you the minimum value. So it's going to be like minus something like very huge, you know, like not that huge but very huge. People try to use that. I don't, and I've seen many implementations and many developers who actually implemented this in this way. So it makes sense to get the first item. That's the minimal. Let's try to infer, let's try to assume that the first one is the minimum, and then we are going to check all the other ones. So let's have an eye of what happens inside the for loop. So inside the for loop we have an if statement, and we are checking that specific item to see if it's less than the minimum. So how can you think about this? Is this item smaller than the minimum? Have we found a new minimum? If yes, then we need to save it. We need to assign that new item to our min variable. Again, is this item a new minimum? Is this value less than what we assumed? Than what we have actually at this point? If yes, assign it. This is the new minimum. So we are trying to see, like, 12 is the first minimum. Is this less? No. Is this less? No. Is 9 less than 12? Yes, it is. Save it. This is the new minimum. Is 3.0 less than 9? Yes, it is. Save that. So 3 is the actual minimum value in our prices array. And then we are going to console.writeLine it to the console, obviously. So let's try to implement this. So I'm going to say prices 0. So I assume, like, this is a good starting point. This is an initial value. So this is why, not why, but what you do with instantiation or initialization. So this is not instantiation because you don't instantiate an object. So you call instantiation when you try to actually create objects. This is initialization. So I'm trying to initialize the min variable with a value. And this is like the default from my point of view. Okay? And then, as I said, a for loop. We are going to keep I as it is, but you can see I go from index 1. So it doesn't make sense to go from index 0 because we just have the first one. So we can just skip the first position, right? So we don't have to iterate over it, just to make it more efficient. So 1, and then I'm going to say prices.length. Okay, and then enter. So inside I have an if statement. I have prices index I. So is this item that I'm iterating over less than the minimum value that I have so far? If it is, then, well, we have just found a new minimum. So prices is going to be, well, minimum is going to be the new item. Okay, so the current item, the current minimum. And then console writeLine, I'm going to print out the min. So let's try to say F5 and see 3. So we indeed get 3 as our minimum value. But again, C# provides us with a min method for arrays. So because I'm going to implement max and it's very similar to min, I'm going to actually leave this code. So I'm going to indeed implement this line. So I'll say var min equals prices.min. And okay, for now we can just comment this out. So control KC, okay. And let's try to say F5, and hopefully we get 3 again. So this is our minimum value with the built-in method. So we don't have to implement the whole thing. We can just say prices.min. And this knows how to get the minimum value. The max. Let's see what is the maximum value in the array. And you can see the same kind of thing. So let's try to get the difference. So what is the difference? Can you spot the difference? I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The difference is actually the name. So the name of the variable. So we don't call it min, we call it max. So control RR. This is going to be max. The actual difference is going to be this one. So instead of less than, it's going to be greater than. And then save. So what is the actual mindset here? So the logic here. The max is going to be again the first one. I assume the first value is the max one. This is my starting point. This is my default value. Then I want to iterate over the prices array, and one by one, is this item greater than max? Have we found an item bigger than max? If we have, then we need to assign it to the max. We just have found a new max. And then I'm going to say to print the max, and let's try to remove this one. So the minimum is going to get out of the picture, and then F5. So let's try to see. So 43.5. Is that correct? Yes, it is. So this is the biggest number in our array. So the maximum value. Amazing. So let's try to press any key. And we have the same thing for max. So instead of implementing the whole thing, so to declare a variable and then to have a for loop and some logic and all of these implementations, we can just say var max equals prices and then max. So you can see we have this max method over here. And this is going to work after we are going to comment this out. So we have an error here because we are trying to declare 2 variables with the same name, okay? So this is not going to work. 2 variables cannot have the same name in the same scope. And we can just say control KC to comment things out, and let's try to say F5 and see again 43.5. So these are the whole things, like all the 4 methods: the sum, the average, the mean, and the max. So you know actually how to implement them procedurally. You know what are the built-in functions, the built-in methods in C# to implement them. You can find the link in the description down below. So the link with all of these methods. So you don't have to write them yourself. You can just copy and paste. And I think I'm too fast. So just copy and paste them from here, and you can have your own implementation. Also, if you go here, you can see that I have a button over here, so help me improve this page. If you click on this link, you are going to go to GitHub, and this is like the new thing, if you know, like just a parentheses here. So Microsoft has just bought GitHub. What a move, you know, like what a move. And I think for like $7 billion or something like that, 7 or 17, I don't know, just many billions of dollars. I don't know what to expect from Microsoft. I think it's going to change, so we are going to see changes in GitHub. I don't know if all of them are going to be for the better or for worse. We are going to see. So again, if you go there and if you enter your credentials and so on, you can make a pull request. And after you make the pull request, I can see it and I can approve it. So you can have like, oh, you missed something, or you don't know how to write or something like that, so you can improve my post. And also, I want to make an announcement. I will not post videos at 6 p.m. UTC anymore. So I'll change the schedule. I will not do that anymore. I'll try to remove the actual schedule from my YouTube profile, so from my YouTube channel. I think that I am actually limiting myself or forcing myself to do videos, first of all, not that often, and second of all, when is not the right timing. So I don't want to have, I don't know, constraints like that. I like to have my own constraints, which actually add more value than just to have a video at 6 p.m. UTC every day. I can have 3 videos throughout the day at random times, and I don't think that is going to be a problem for you. So this is not going to be like, oh, if I remove the schedule, I'm not going to post that frequently. Not at all. So I'm going to post, and I'm going to post even more often than before. So previously I was posting 5 times a week. From now on, I think I can post like, I don't know, 10 times, or I just want to have that freedom. And if I have that freedom, I can be very productive and very effective with my channel, with my videos, with my website, so with all these things. So if you like the idea, please click thumbs up so I know that we have kind of the same mindset. So I don't think this schedule helps you that much. I think the actual value lies in the videos, not in a schedule. So just for you to know, this is what I'm going to do. And I hope it's going to be a great move for myself and for my audience, for you guys. So this is again not something that, oh, I will not post that often. Maybe I will post more frequently than before. Okay, so if you liked it, please click thumbs up, comment down below questions, and consider subscribing as well. Until next time, bye guys.